In the last tutorial, we were left with a game. Although functional, it wasn't really that aesthetically pleasing. So in this video, we'll be focusing on creating a random color generation system, and once it's done, we'll be able to give Unity a list of colors to pick from, and then when we run the game, a color from that list will be randomly selected. So let's begin. Before we can actually start adding the color system, I'd like to fix a small problem that I noticed, but it might not be immediately obvious on the recording. It's that the edges of our player look a bit jagged or not smooth. This is happening because computer graphics are made up of small squares called pixels. When trying to create an arc, or really anything that's not a straight line, the result can never be truly smooth. What we can do to fix this is apply anti-aliasing, which uses a whole lot of complex maths to blur the edges of an image slightly, which ends up making it look much smoother. But I must warn you that there's a downside to using anti-aliasing. It can have severe impacts on performance in a negative way. So if you're not planning on publishing to lower-end devices like mobile phones, then all you have to do to increase the anti-aliasing is go to Edit, Project Settings, Quality. Now in the inspector, you'll see a whole lot of information that we don't need to worry about. All we want to do is change the anti-aliasing to 4x multi-sampling, and that's it. Because we want to change the color of the player, Unity needs to know what colors we're going to use. For this, we'll be using materials, which hold data like texture, color, normal map, but we only need to use the color component. So in our project window, let's create a new folder named Materials. Once again, this is just to keep things organized. Now inside that folder, we're going to create a material by going to Create, Material. Now we'll be given the option to name it. Once the material is created, you'll see that Unity has a whole lot of options that are useless for the game that we're creating. So let's change the shader on the material to Unlit Color. This means two things. One, the lighting in the scene does not affect this material, which is good, because we don't actually have any lighting. And that all we have to do is choose a color. So once you've selected a color, you can begin creating many more materials. For the sake of the video, I'll speed this process up a bit. Really, all we're doing is selecting the colors for our random color generator script to use. So now that that's done, we can write our code. In our scripts folder, we're going to create a new C# script, and although the name is up to you, I'll use color. We can open the code up in our IDE of choice, and it will present us with the automatically generated code. Because in this code we want to create a list of colors, we actually need to tell Unity to use the list. To do this, at the top where we're gathering resources, we need to add using, which tells the language to collect something, then write system.collections.generic. which allows us to create list variables, then end the line with a semicolon. Now we can start writing the code that's inside our color class. First thing we're going to do is declare the list variable, but because we want to see it in Unity, we're going to use the keyword public. A list is actually like a whole lot of variables in one spot. For example, we could have a list of floats, but the data type that we're going to use is a material. So to write this, you actually say list, open angle bracket, material, close angle bracket. Now we need to give a name to our list. This is up to personal preference, but I've decided on mats, which is just short for materials. Now, to actually generate this empty list, we need to say equals new list, open angle bracket, material, close angle bracket, and then opening and closing parenthesis. Be very careful about this line, because the syntax of declaring a list is just a little bit strange. Once we end the line in a semicolon, we're going to need to actually change the color. Because we only want to change the color when the player is created, we don't want to use the update function. Instead, we'll use a function called awake, which can be used by writing void, because it does not need to return anything, followed by awake, open close parenthesis. Notice the capital A. Now, anything that we write in the body of this function will be called once when the player is created. So to change the material of an object, we first have to get the game renderer. Well, in the old Unity, we could have just written renderer.material. But in Unity 5, to get the renderer, we must write get component, then in angle brackets the component that we need, which is the renderer. Now that we need an opening and closing pair of parentheses. I think this is because get components a function, but don't quote me on that. Now because we want to affect the material, we write dot material. Because we want to set the material to something, we use an equal sign, followed by what we want to set it to. Well, we're going to need to set it to a random material from our list. The way we do this is we can actually write mats, and then in square brackets, reference a number. For example, 0 would refer to the first material in the list, and 3 would refer to the fourth material in the list if that actually existed. Well, what we're going to do is actually generate a random number between 0 and the last material in the list. To do this, we can use the function random.range. This takes two parameters, the first being the starting number, which will just be 0, and the second parameter, separated by comma, is the highest number that we want to generate. For this, we can use the size of our list by writing mats.count. Now when we close off everything and end the line in a semicolon, we're actually done. Just be very careful when writing out this line, because not only is the syntax quite difficult, but the logic can be pretty difficult to understand. So if we save and then jump back into Unity, we can actually apply our script. Now we're not going to apply it to our player. Instead, we need to put it on the mesh, because this holds the material of the player. So we can drag our code file into the mesh and we can see our public mats variable has been created. And if you click on the drop down arrow, Unity will give us the option to change the size of the list. This number should just be how many materials you actually created earlier. So for me, 3. Now we can set the value of each element. And what we're going to do is drag the materials that we created from the materials folder into each slot for the element. Now if we run the game using the play button, we see that the player's color change, and if we keep repeatedly running the program over and over and over again, we can see that the colors are actually chosen randomly. That's all for this tutorial. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so that you can get notified about the next tutorial, where we'll be covering some fun stuff about the procedurally generated food system. And if you want to download the project files or code files, there will be a link in the description. If you have any problems with the game, feel free to post a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks. Bye.